The Galactic Council chamber fell silent when Ambassador Chenwei stood to speak, which was unusual because humans rarely demanded attention, and even more rarely received it. For 300 years, humanity had been the galaxy's most reliable mediators, the species that every civilization called upon to negotiate peace, to find compromise, to soothe wounded pride and translate between incompatible philosophies. They were the gardeners of diplomacy, the weavers of treaties, the eternal students of 10,000 alien cultures who somehow never seemed to have conflicts of their own. Commander Tyra Velkan of the Zetharian Empire watched from the observation deck with growing unease, her platinum feathers rustling beneath her ceremonial armor as Chenwei's expression remained perfectly, impossibly calm. "Esteemed delegates," Chenwei began, his voice carrying the same gentle warmth that had negotiated peace between the Silicon Collective and the Organic Alliance 40 years prior. "Humanity wishes to inform this council that we are formally withdrawing from all mediation duties, effective immediately. We are recalling all human personnel from diplomatic posts, neutral zones, and peacekeeping operations across the galaxy." The chamber erupted into chaos, delegates from hundreds of species shouting questions and protests in a cacophony of languages and electromagnetic frequencies, but Chenwei simply bowed with that characteristic human grace and walked away, his delegation following in perfect, silent order. Tyra felt her primary heart skip a beat as her eyes met those of Dr. Sarachin, the xenoanthropologist who had been embedded with her fleet for 2 years, the human woman who had taught her to appreciate Earth poetry and whose smile had become something Tyra thought about far more often than military protocol would approve. Sarah's expression was not calm. Beneath the professional mask, Tyra could see something she had never witnessed in a human before, something that made her combat instincts flare to life with primal warning. It was rage, cold and deep and patient, and it was shared by every human in the delegation as they departed without another word. The council continued its uproar for hours after the humans left, with senior representatives demanding explanations and junior delegates speculating wildly about what could have prompted such unprecedented behavior from humanity, but Tyra had already left the chamber, her talons clicking rapidly against the polished floor as she raced toward the human quarters where Sarah had resided during her assignment. The door opened before she could signal, and Sarah stood there with a packed travel case, her dark eyes meeting Tyra's with an intensity that sent heat through the Zetharian's dual circulatory system. "You weren't going to say goodbye," Tyra said, trying to keep the hurt from her voice and failing, her translator chip struggling to capture the complexity of emotion that transcended species. Sarah's face softened for just a moment, and she reached out to touch Tyra's arm, her small human hand warm against the Zetharian's scaled skin. "I couldn't," Sarah whispered, and Tyra heard the tremor beneath the words, the crack in that remarkable human composure. "If I saw you, I knew I would want to explain, and I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." She moved a step past Tyra, but the warrior caught her hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had taken months to perfect given their different anatomies, a private language they had developed during long night watches aboard Tyra's flagship. "What happened?" Tyra demanded, her voice dropping to the subsonic rumble that her species used for matters of absolute seriousness. "Sarah, in 2 years you have never been anything but honest with me. Whatever has occurred, whatever has prompted this, you can trust me with the truth." Sarah looked at their joined hands for a long moment, and when she raised her eyes again, Tyra saw tears forming, which was shocking because humans almost never cried in public, their emotional control legendary throughout the galaxy. "The colony," Sarah said simply, and those 2 words carried the weight of worlds. "New Harmony. They're gone. All of them. 200,000 humans, including my sister's entire family, her children, her grandchildren. The Kreth Dominion wanted the planet for its rare earth deposits, and when the colonists refused to leave their homes, when they cited Galactic Council protection and sent petition after petition to this very chamber, the Kreth simply removed the problem." Tyra's blood went cold, her feathers flattening against her skull in a threat display that was entirely instinctive. The Kreth Dominion were a brutal species, conquerors by nature, but they generally respected council law out of pure pragmatism, understanding that the economic benefits of galactic trade outweighed the gains of random aggression. "Removed?" she asked, though she already knew the answer, could read it in the devastation on Sarah's face. They sterilized the planet, Sarah confirmed, her voice now completely flat, empty of all emotion in a way that was somehow more terrifying than rage would have been. Biological weapons, designed to target human DNA specifically. The kind of weaponry that has been banned by the Council for 6 centuries, ever since the Plague Wars nearly destroyed the entire galactic community. 200,000 people died in agony over the course of 3 days while their distress calls went unanswered, while Council bureaucrats debated jurisdiction and procedure. The full horror of it crashed over Tyra like a physical force, and she pulled Sarah into an embrace, folding her wings around the smaller woman in a protective gesture that her species reserved for cherished ones. Sarah remained rigid for a moment, then collapsed against her, her body shaking with silent sobs that she refused to give voice. "I'm so sorry," Tyra breathed, the words pathetically inadequate. "The Council will respond to this, they must. This is a clear violation of fundamental law, the Kreth leadership will be sanctioned, the perpetrators will face justice." But even as she spoke, she knew the words rang hollow. Council justice was slow, often symbolic, designed to preserve political balance rather than deliver meaningful consequences. She had seen it 1,000 times in her military career, watching as aggressive species calculated exactly how much violence they could commit before the cost of Council disapproval outweighed the benefits of conquest. Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes with that efficient human gesture that seemed to physically rebuild her composure. "The Council held an emergency session 3 weeks ago," she said, her voice steady again, hard as diamond. "They issued a formal reprimand to the Kreth Dominion and imposed a fine of 10,000 credits per victim. 2 billion credits total, which amounts to approximately 0.1% of the Kreth annual military budget. The Dominion paid it immediately and issued a statement calling the incident an unfortunate administrative error. The calculated insult of such a response made Tyra's combat instincts surge, her talons extending involuntarily. She had fought in 17 major conflicts during her career, had commanded fleets against pirates and insurgents, but she had never felt the urge to violence as strongly as she did in that moment, imagining those responsible for Sarah's pain facing proper Zetherian justice. "What will humanity do?" Tyra asked, though she feared she already knew, had seen the answer in Ambassador Chinwei's calm exit from the Council floor. Sarah met her eyes with that same cold fire burning beneath the surface. "We asked the galaxy to share our love of peace," she said quietly. "We studied every species, learned every language, mediated every conflict, built bridges between civilizations that had warred for millennia. We believed that diversity was strength, that understanding could overcome any disagreement, that violence was always the last resort of limited imagination." She picked up her travel case, her movements deliberate and controlled. "But we also learned every weakness, every strategic vulnerability, every cultural pressure point, every technological limitation of every species in the galaxy. We did it because we believed that understanding prevented conflict, and we were right. But understanding works both ways, Tyra." The implications of that statement hit Tyra like a photon torpedo, her tactical mind immediately grasping what Sarah was truly saying. Humanity's diplomatic corps were not just negotiators, they were intelligence gatherers on a scale that no military organization in galactic history had ever achieved, and they had been doing it with the full cooperation and trust of every species in the galaxy for 300 years. Humans knew where every civilization's critical infrastructure was located, which planets were agricultural centers and which were industrial, which politicians could be influenced and which were intractable, which trade routes were essential and which were merely convenient. They knew cultural taboos that could shatter alliances, religious symbols that could incite populations, historical grievances that could be exploited to divide coalitions. They had the complete strategic picture of the entire galaxy, had assembled it piece by piece while everyone assumed they were simply being characteristically curious and friendly. "Sarah," Tyra said carefully, her military training warring with her personal feelings, "what exactly is humanity planning to do with this information?" The human woman looked at her with something like regret, like affection mixed with sorrow, and leaned forward to press her forehead against Tyra's in the gesture of intimate trust that the Zetherian had taught her months ago, during their first night together when diplomacy had transformed into something deeper and infinitely more complicated. "I love you," Sarah whispered, the first time either of them had spoken the words aloud despite dancing around them for half a year. I need you to remember that in the coming days, when you hear things about humanity, when your government issues orders, when you're asked to make impossible choices. Whatever happens, whatever you see, remember that humans are capable of love, that we prefer creation to destruction, that peace has always been our first choice. Then she was gone, walking away with that characteristic human efficiency, leaving Tyra standing alone in the corridor with a sense of dread settling over her like a tactical shroud. She returned to her flagship within the hour, her crew snapping to attention as she took her command chair and immediately requested a secure channel to Zetharian High Command. Admiral Kronthax appeared on the view screen, his ancient feathers gray with age but his eyes still sharp with the intelligence that had made him the most successful military commander in Zetharian history. "Commander Velkan," he greeted her with approval in his tone, "you show excellent instincts in making contact. I assume you've heard about the human withdrawal from Council operations and wish to discuss the implications." "Admiral, I have reason to believe humanity is preparing for military action," Tyra reported formally, pushing her personal feelings into a locked compartment in her mind, operating purely on professional discipline. "The New Harmony massacre appears to have been the triggering incident, and based on my interactions with human personnel, I assess their response will be unprecedented in scale." Kronthax nodded slowly, his expression grave. "Your assessment matches our intelligence reports. 6 hours ago, every human ship in the galaxy began returning to human-controlled space, including civilian vessels, trade ships, research stations, and private craft. They are evacuating personnel from mixed-species colonies, withdrawing investments from joint corporations, and severing communication links with non-human networks. Humanity is isolating itself completely, and our analysts cannot agree on whether this represents a defensive posture or preparation for offensive operations." Tyra felt her chest tighten with anxiety, her tactical mind already running scenarios. "Admiral, humanity has no significant military fleet. Their defense force is minimal, designed primarily for system patrol and asteroid mining operations. Even if they mobilized their entire commercial shipping capacity as auxiliary craft, they couldn't threaten a major power like the Kreth Dominion, let alone project force across the galaxy." Kronthax's expression became even more serious, and he leaned closer to the communication pickup. "That is what concerns me most, Commander. Humanity has been peaceful for 300 years, has built no dreadnoughts, maintains no invasion forces, possesses no weapons platforms that our intelligence services have identified. Yet they are withdrawing from the galaxy with the confidence of a species that knows exactly what it's doing. Either they are bluffing on a civilizational scale, hoping to prompt Council action through dramatic gestures, or they have capabilities that they have successfully hidden from every intelligence service in the galaxy for centuries. The third option, the one neither of them wanted to voice, hung in the air between them unspoken. Humanity might have capabilities that they had never needed to hide because no one had ever thought to look for them, assuming that a peaceful species had no weapons worth finding. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Tyra asked, straightening in her command chair. Kronthax was silent for a moment, his talons drumming against his own chair in the rhythmic pattern that indicated deep strategic consideration. "Mobilize your fleet to high alert status but take no aggressive action against human vessels or territory. Monitor all human activity within your patrol zone and report any unusual behavior immediately. And Commander," he added, his voice softening slightly, "I know you have formed a personal attachment to the human xenoanthropologist embedded with your command. I do not criticize this, as cross-species understanding has always been valuable, but I order you to maintain professional distance until this situation resolves. We cannot afford compromised judgment at this critical moment." Tyra acknowledged the order with proper military formality, though the words cut deeper than any enemy weapon ever had. The communication ended, and she sat in her command chair, staring at the star field displayed on the main view screen, wondering where Sarah was in that vast darkness, what she was doing, what humanity was planning in those mysterious systems that had always welcomed visitors but never quite revealed all their secrets. Her tactical officer interrupted her thoughts with a priority alert, his young voice crackling with barely controlled alarm. "Commander, we're receiving reports from border stations. The Kreth Dominion's third fleet, the one responsible for the New Harmony operation, has gone silent. Approximately 47 ships including their flagship, all communication ceased simultaneously 17 minutes ago. Tyra's combat instincts snapped into full focus, her mind cataloging possibilities and probabilities with trained efficiency. Define gone silent, Lieutenant. Are we detecting debris fields indicating an attack? Energy signatures from weapons fire? Any sensor data at all? The tactical officer worked his console frantically, coordinating with multiple tracking stations across the sector. Negative on all counts, Commander. The fleet was in standard patrol formation in the Drethkai system, then all transponder signals simultaneously ceased. Long-range scans of the system show nothing. No ships, no debris, no energy signatures, no thermal readings. The entire fleet has simply vanished, along with the system's 2 monitoring stations and a small commercial way station that was docked at the 4th planet. A cold certainty settled over Tyra as she remembered Sarah's words, her warning, her goodbye. Communications, she ordered, her voice cutting through the rising concern on her bridge. Get me every intelligence report from human border regions, every sensor log from the past 6 hours, coordinate with all Allied fleet commands. I want to know if any other ships or installations have disappeared. The response came back within minutes, and the pattern was undeniable and absolutely terrifying. 17 separate incidents across the galaxy, each one targeting Kreth Dominion military assets, each one resulting in complete disappearance of vessels and installations without any detected weapons fire, without any warning, without any survivors or debris. Entire battle groups were simply ceasing to exist, removed from reality as thoroughly as if they had never been built, and no one in the galaxy had any idea how humanity was doing it or how to stop it. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within 8 hours of the first disappearances, and this time the chamber was filled not with bureaucratic posturing but with genuine fear, a primal emotion that transcended species boundaries and political allegiances. Tyra attended via holographic projection from her flagship, standing among the rows of delegates while her physical body remained on the bridge, monitoring the tactical situation that was deteriorating with every passing hour. The Kreth Dominion's ambassador, a massive reptilian creature named Scarthex whose species had conquered 47 worlds over the past 2 centuries, stood before the assembly with his aggressive confidence notably diminished, his scaled hide pale with stress hormones that even other species could recognize. The Dominion demands council intervention, Scarthex declared, his translator struggling to soften the harsh clicking language of his people into something approximating diplomatic speech. Humanity has committed acts of war against our sovereign fleets, destroying military assets without declaration of hostilities, without offering terms, without following any recognized protocols of civilized conflict. This is terrorism on an interstellar scale, and the Council must condemn these actions and authorize a coalition response to neutralize the human threat. The irony of the Kreth appealing to civilized protocols mere weeks after sterilizing an entire colony planet was apparently lost on Scarthex, but it was not lost on anyone else in the chamber, and the response to his demand was notable primarily for its silence. Chancellor Merdatha of the Silicon Collective, whose crystalline form refracted light in patterns that indicated deep contemplation, finally spoke in the musical tones that her species used for serious matters. Ambassador Scarthex, the Council notes your concerns, but we must also acknowledge certain contextual realities. The Kreth Dominion utilized banned biological weapons against a civilian population in clear violation of fundamental galactic law, and the Council's response was widely perceived as inadequate by numerous member species, not merely humanity. Perhaps a more productive approach would be to seek dialogue with human leadership to understand their grievances and negotiate a peaceful resolution. The suggestion was reasonable and measured, exactly the kind of diplomatic solution that the old Council would have pursued, but it was immediately rendered obsolete by what happened next. Every display screen in the Council chamber simultaneously activated without authorization, overriding security protocols that were supposed to make such intrusions impossible, and Ambassador Chinwei appeared on all of them, his expression still carrying that unsettling combination of perfect calm and absolute determination. "Esteemed delegates," he said, his voice broadcasting through every communication system in the chamber, humanity wishes to clarify our position, as there appears to be some confusion about our intentions and capabilities. We are not seeking dialogue. We are not interested in negotiations. We are not requesting council intervention or mediation. We are delivering justice, and we will continue to do so until every individual responsible for the New Harmony massacre has been held accountable. Scarthex's combat instincts overrode his diplomatic training, and he roared a challenge at the screens displaying Chinwei's image. Your threats mean nothing, human. Your species has no military tradition, no warrior culture, no capability to project force against the Dominion's fleets. You have destroyed some ships through cowardly ambush tactics, but the moment you reveal your weapons, we will adapt our defenses and crush your pathetic civilization like the insects you resemble. Chinwei's expression did not change, did not show anger or offense or any emotional reaction to the insult, which somehow made his response infinitely more chilling. Ambassador Scarthex, we are not using weapons. We are using knowledge, which is far more devastating than any armament, and against which there is no possible defense for a species like yours. The screen shifted to display star charts, showing the locations of the 17 disappeared Kreth fleets with precise coordinates and timestamps. Each of these battle groups was eliminated using detailed understanding of Kreth psychology, technology, and operational doctrine. We did not need to fire weapons because we convinced your crews to fire on themselves, to disable their own safety systems, to override their own containment fields, to tear their ships apart from within using nothing more than carefully crafted information delivered through channels you believed were secure. The implications of that statement sent waves of shocked understanding through the council chamber, delegates from dozens of species suddenly realizing that if humanity could compromise Kreth communication systems so thoroughly, they could potentially do the same to any civilization in the galaxy. Chinwei continued with relentless precision, his words carefully chosen to maximum effect. The Kreth Dominion operates under a strict hierarchical military structure with honor codes that emphasize absolute loyalty to superior officers. We sent authenticated orders from commanders who were not actually issuing those orders, exploiting your cultural inability to question authority even when those orders were obviously suicidal. We triggered ancient clan rivalries that you believed were resolved centuries ago but which remain embedded in your military organization structure, causing ships to fire on each other in the belief they were eliminating traitors. We manipulated your religious prophecies, your superstitions, your deepest cultural fears, using 300 years of anthropological research to find the exact psychological pressure points that would shatter discipline and cohesion. Tyra watched Scarthex's expression transform from anger to horror as he understood what humanity had truly been doing during their centuries of peaceful study, how every cultural exchange and academic collaboration had been building a comprehensive database of vulnerabilities that could be exploited with surgical precision. Chinwei was not finished, his calm voice delivering each sentence like a precisely targeted munition. We know how every species in this galaxy thinks, how they make decisions, what they value, what they fear, what will make them fight and what will make them flee. We know which politicians can be blackmailed, which military commanders can be bribed, which populations can be incited to revolution, which economies can be collapsed with minimal intervention. We built this knowledge carefully and openly, and you all helped us do it because you believed that understanding promoted peace. The screen shifted again, now displaying real-time tactical data that should have been classified beyond any civilian access, showing the current positions of every major military fleet in the galaxy with detailed analysis of their capabilities and vulnerabilities. You were correct that understanding promotes peace, Chinwei acknowledged. For 300 years, our comprehensive knowledge of galactic civilization allowed us to mediate conflicts, to find compromises, to prevent wars before they started. We genuinely believed in peace, genuinely worked to build a galaxy where violence was unnecessary and understanding could resolve all disputes. And then the Kreth Dominion murdered 200,000 of our people while the Galactic Council debated procedure and issued meaningless fines, and we realized that some species only understand one language. Scarthex lunged toward the nearest display screen as if he could physically attack Chinwei's image, his massive claws scraping harmlessly against the projection surface. You will pay for this arrogance, human. The Dominion will mobilize our full military might, will burn every human world to ash, will ensure your species is remembered only as a cautionary tale about the price of threatening your betters. Chinwei's expression finally shifted, and for just a moment, Tyra saw the same cold rage she had witnessed in Sarah's eyes, the same patient fury that had been building beneath humanity's peaceful exterior for however long they had endured the galaxy's casual dismissal of their concerns and capabilities. Ambassador Scarthax, you are no longer authorized to speak for the Kreth Dominion, Chinwei said quietly, and before anyone could process that statement, the screens shifted once more to show the Kreth homeworld, the massive fortress planet that had been the center of their empire for 2,000 years, the seat of power that no enemy had ever successfully threatened. The planet's orbital defense platforms were activating, their weapons systems charging and targeting, but they were not aiming outward at approaching threats. They were aiming at each other. And at the planet's surface, at the military command centers and governmental palaces and industrial complexes that made the Dominion function as an interstellar power. 3 minutes ago, the Kreth High Command received authenticated orders from their supreme leader to execute Protocol 77, which is your civilization's final contingency plan in the event that your homeworld faces imminent conquest by an overwhelming enemy force, Chinwei explained as the Council watched in frozen horror. Protocol 77 calls for the complete sterilization of your homeworld to prevent enemy forces from capturing vital strategic resources or symbolic locations. It is based on your cultural belief that death in defiance is more honorable than survival in submission, and it has been part of your military doctrine for 900 years, practiced in simulations but never actually executed. Scarthax was making desperate gestures with his communication implant, trying to contact his homeworld, trying to countermand the orders, but his frantic efforts were clearly meeting with no success. Your supreme leader did not actually issue those orders, Chinwei continued mercilessly. We did, using communication protocols that we learned about from the Kreth military attaché who served on our colony world of New Harmony, who attended cultural exchanges with human families, who shared meals with colonists including Dr. Sarah Chen's grandnieces and taught them traditional Kreth war games while their parents taught him Earth music. He died with them when your Dominion sterilized the planet, but the knowledge he shared in friendship became a weapon that is now aimed at the heart of your civilization. The council chamber erupted in chaos as delegates shouted for Chinwei to stop, to show mercy, to accept terms, but the human ambassador simply stood silent and still, watching the countdown with the same peaceful expression he had worn while negotiating trade agreements and cultural treaties. Chancellor Merdatha's voice cut through the noise with an electronically amplified command that forced silence. Ambassador Chinwei, humanity has made its point. You have demonstrated capabilities that we did not know existed and power that we failed to respect. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally apologize for our inadequate response to the New Harmony massacre and pledge to immediately convene a tribunal to properly address the crimes committed against your people. Please, in the name of the peace you have championed for 3 centuries, do not commit genocide in response to genocide. Do not allow this tragedy to transform humanity into the very thing you are fighting against. Chinwei looked directly at the Chancellor, and Tyra thought she saw a flicker of something that might have been pain cross his features before the mask of composure returned. Chancellor, humanity does not want to commit genocide, Chinwei replied. We want justice, which is different. The protocol now executing on the Kreth homeworld will target only military installations and governmental complexes, only the infrastructure of conquest and the leadership responsible for ordering atrocities. Civilian population centers have been excluded from targeting parameters, and the casualty count will be approximately 400,000 individuals, all of whom are either military personnel or government officials who participated in the decision to sterilize New Harmony. The precision of that number, the calculated proportionality, was somehow more terrifying than indiscriminate destruction would have been, demonstrating that humanity was not acting from blind rage but from carefully measured determination. However, Chinwei continued, this is not a negotiation, and we will not be halting our operations in exchange for promises of future justice. The tribunal you propose will proceed, and we will provide comprehensive evidence of every individual who participated in planning, authorizing, or executing the attack on our colony. Those individuals will be tried according to galactic law, and if the Council fails to deliver appropriate sentences, we will implement our own justice as we are doing now. consider this demonstration a proof of capability, evidence that humanity possesses the means to enforce consequences that the Council apparently cannot or will not deliver through normal channels. The screens went dark, Chen Wei's image disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving the Council in stunned silence as the reality of the new galactic order settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Tyra returned her full consciousness to her physical body on the bridge, dismissing the holographic projection and immediately checking tactical displays to assess the situation developing across her patrol zone. Her communications officer signaled for attention, his feathers pressed flat in distress. "Commander, we're receiving a priority message on a secure channel, human encryption, addressed to you personally. It's flagged as urgent and intimate." Tyra's hearts raced as she accepted the transmission in her private ready room, the door sealing behind her with a soft hiss that granted absolute privacy, and Sarah's face appeared on her personal display, looking exhausted and sad and achingly beautiful despite the obvious strain. "Tyra," Sarah began, and just the sound of her name and that familiar voice made the Zetharian warrior feel emotions that military training had never prepared her to handle. "I have approximately 3 minutes before my shuttle docks with the research vessel that will take me back to human space, and I needed to see you one more time, to explain what I couldn't say before." She paused, gathering her thoughts with visible effort. Everything Chen Wei said to the Council was true. "We did learn every species' vulnerabilities. We can manipulate civilizations with precision that would terrify you if you truly understood the scope, and we are fully prepared to use that knowledge to ensure the New Harmony massacre never happens again to any human colony anywhere in the galaxy." Tyra wanted to interrupt, to ask 1,000 questions, to demand details or offer comfort or simply say that she understood, but Sarah's time was limited and she needed to speak her piece without interruption. But what he didn't say, what humanity will never admit publicly because it would undermine the strategic deterrent we're establishing, is that we're absolutely terrified, Sarah continued, her voice cracking slightly. "We have no actual military fleet, no weapons platforms, no capability to fight a conventional war against any major power. Everything we're doing right now depends on psychology and manipulation and carefully maintained illusion of unlimited reach. If the galaxy calls our bluff, if multiple species coordinate a response, if anyone develops effective countermeasures to our information warfare tactics, humanity will be exposed as having exactly the minimal defenses that your intelligence services already identified." The admission shocked Tyra, the vulnerability behind humanity's demonstration of power revealing a desperation that made their actions comprehensible in an entirely new way. Sarah leaned closer to the camera, her eyes intense with the need to make Tyra understand. "We're burning 300 years of accumulated trust and goodwill to deliver one message, gambling our entire future on the hope that we can make the galaxy believe we're powerful enough to threaten anyone who threatens us, deadly enough that the cost of attacking human colonies will always exceed any possible benefit. It's a massive bluff, and it only works if everyone believes it completely, if no one tests our limits, if fear of unknown capabilities prevents anyone from discovering that our capabilities are actually quite limited once you understand the mechanisms." "Why are you telling me this?" Tyra asked, her tactical mind already cataloging the strategic implications of such information, the advantage it would give Zetharian intelligence services, the vulnerability Sarah was creating in humanity's carefully constructed deterrent. Sarah smiled with heartbreaking sadness, and Tyra saw the tears forming again, the emotional control finally crumbling under the weight of too much loss and too much responsibility. "Because I love you," Sarah said simply. "Because you deserve to know the truth from someone who cares about you, not just tactical assessments from analysts who see you as an asset or a threat. Because I need you to understand that if this bluff fails, if humanity's gambit collapses and the galaxy realizes we're not actually the unstoppable force we're pretending to be, my people will face extinction, and I wanted someone I trust to know that we tried our best with the tools we had available." Tyra felt her own emotional control slipping, her talons clenching and unclenching with the frustrated desire to physically protect Sarah from threats that existed on civilizational scales far beyond any individual warrior's reach. "Sarah, I can't. I don't know how to respond to this. You're asking me to keep information from my superiors that could fundamentally alter Zetharian strategic planning, that could potentially save lives if conflicts develop between our peoples, that violates every oath I've taken as a military officer." Sarah nodded understanding, not asking for promises or commitments, simply offering truth and trusting Tyra to make her own choices about how to use it. "I know what I'm asking," Sarah acknowledged. "I know it's unfair and complicated and potentially impossible. But I also know that you're brilliant and honorable and capable of understanding nuance that pure military doctrine can't accommodate. Humanity isn't your enemy, Tyra. We're scared refugees trying to ensure our survival in a galaxy that just demonstrated it won't protect us when truly dangerous species decide we're inconvenient. The Kreth aren't the only civilization that has calculated that council disapproval is cheaper than restraint, and we can't mediate peace for others while knowing that our own people are vulnerable to anyone willing to pay the fine for murdering us." The bitter truth of that assessment cut deep, and Tyra recognized it from her own military experience, had seen exactly that calculation play out in border disputes and resource conflicts throughout her career. "What do you need from me?" Tyra asked, the question emerging before her conscious mind had fully processed the decision, her heart overruling tactical consideration and military obligation in a way that would have horrified her instructors at the War Academy. Sarah's expression softened with relief and gratitude and love that transcended the vast differences in their biologies and backgrounds. "Time," she said. "Humanity needs time for the galaxy to internalize the message we're sending, to let fear and uncertainty work on political calculations, to establish the deterrent thoroughly enough that testing it seems too dangerous even for aggressive species. If the Zetharian Empire or other major powers coordinate a response in the next few weeks, if they probe our defenses before we've solidified the strategic situation, everything collapses and my people face exactly the same vulnerability that got New Harmony destroyed." "How much time?" Tyra pressed, her tactical training reasserting itself, needing concrete parameters to work with rather than vague requests. Sarah checked something off-screen, probably monitoring her shuttle's docking approach. 60 days, she estimated. 2 months for enough incidents like what happened to the Kreth homeworld to occur across the galaxy, for every civilization with aggressive tendencies to receive personalized demonstrations of humanity's reach and capabilities, for the psychological impact to settle into political calculations at every level of galactic society. After that, the deterrent will be self-sustaining, maintained by fear and uncertainty rather than requiring constant proof, and humanity can return to what we actually prefer, which is peaceful cooperation with species that are willing to respect our sovereignty and safety. The tactical officer's voice interrupted through Tyra's communication implant, reporting that additional Kreth installations were going dark across the sector. That panic was spreading through multiple species' military commands as they realized humanity had potentially compromised their secure communications as thoroughly as they had penetrated Kreth systems. Tyra acknowledged the report with a brief affirmative, buying herself a few more precious seconds with Sarah before duty would force her back to the bridge and the escalating crisis. "I will do what I can," she promised carefully, not committing to specific actions but offering the support that her position and influence allowed. "But Sarah, you need to understand that if humanity's actions threaten Zetharian interests directly, if my people's safety requires me to act against human objectives, I will not sacrifice my species' welfare for personal attachment, no matter how deeply I feel that attachment." Sarah nodded acceptance of those terms, understanding the necessary boundaries that military officers couldn't cross regardless of personal desires. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you," she said gently. "Your honor and loyalty are part of why I love you, and I would never ask you to betray those qualities. All I'm requesting is that you consider carefully before assuming humanity is the threat your analysts might portray, that you remember we spent 3 centuries trying to build peace before circumstances forced us to demonstrate the alternative." Her shuttle must have completed docking because alarms sounded in the background of her transmission, and she glanced away briefly before returning her attention to Tyra with visible reluctance. "I have to go," Sarah said, the words heavy with finality and unspoken longing. "They're sealing the airlocks, and all human personnel have been ordered to maintain communication silence with non-human contacts until the strategic situation stabilizes. I don't know when I'll be able to contact you again, or if I'll be able to at all, but I needed you to know that these months with you were the happiest of my life, and whatever happens in the coming days, I will remember your kindness and patience and the extraordinary gift of being understood across all the barriers that separate our species. Tyra felt her composure crumbling, felt the carefully maintained separation between personal and professional collapsing under the weight of imminent loss. "Sarah, wait," she called out, desperately trying to find words adequate to the moment, to express feelings that military training had never equipped her to handle. "When this is over, when the situation stabilizes and humanity establishes whatever new relationship with the galaxy you're building, will you come back? Will we have another chance?" Sarah's smile was heartbreaking in its sad beauty, hope and doubt mixing in expression that Tyra would remember for the rest of her life. "I want that more than I can express," Sarah answered honestly. "But I don't know if it's possible, don't know what the galaxy will look like when humanity finishes delivering its message, don't know if I'll survive what's coming or if the duties my people will demand of me will leave room for personal happiness. All I can offer is the promise that if there's any possible way for us to find each other again, I will search for it with the same determination that my species is bringing to ensuring our survival." The transmission ended before Tyra could respond, Sarah's face disappearing from the display and leaving only the standard Imperial seal indicating a terminated connection. Tyra sat motionless in her ready room for a long moment, processing emotions and information that were equally overwhelming, then forced herself to stand, to straighten her uniform, to rebuild the professional composure that command required. She emerged onto the bridge to find her senior staff waiting with carefully neutral expressions, clearly aware that something significant had occurred but disciplined enough not to pry into their commander's private affairs. "Status report," Tyra ordered crisply, her voice carrying no trace of the emotional turmoil churning beneath her professional exterior. Her tactical officer brought up the latest intelligence summaries, showing a galaxy-wide pattern of human action that was breathtaking in its scope and coordination. 73 separate incidents across 22 different species territories, each one precisely targeted at military or governmental assets belonging to individuals or organizations that humanity's intelligence network had identified as either directly responsible for the New Harmony massacre or complicit in the broader culture of casual violence against weaker species. The message was unmistakable, delivered with such overwhelming clarity that even the most aggressive civilizations were beginning to recalculate their strategic assumptions about humanity's role in galactic affairs. "Commander," her intelligence officer reported hesitantly, the young Zetharian clearly uncertain how such information would be received, were also detecting significant movement in human-controlled systems, massive energy signatures consistent with either industrial production on unprecedented scales or possibly weapons testing of some kind. "Our long-range sensors can't penetrate human jamming effectively enough to determine specifics, but whatever they're doing in their core territories involves power generation levels that exceed our previous estimates of human capabilities by at least an order of magnitude." Tyra absorbed that information with carefully hidden concern, wondering if Sarah had been entirely truthful about humanity's limited military capabilities or if there were additional layers to humanity's strategic position that even someone with Sarah's access might not be fully aware of. The galaxy was changing, she realized, transformed in a matter of hours from a comfortable if imperfect order based on council mediation and economic interdependence to something far more uncertain, where the most peaceful species had suddenly become the most threatening and where assumptions that had held for centuries were revealed as dangerous illusions. And somewhere in that changing galaxy, Sarah was traveling back to human space, carrying secrets and sorrows in the fragile hope that love might survive the collision of civilizations and the terrible necessities of species survival. Tyra looked out at the stars displayed on her view screen and made a decision that would have consequences she couldn't fully predict, choosing to trust in humanity's stated intentions rather than assuming the worst, gambling her career and possibly her species' security on the belief that Sarah had been honest and that time was truly what humanity needed most. "All ships are to maintain defensive postures only," she ordered firmly. "No approaches to human vessels or territories without my direct authorization, no actions that could be interpreted as threatening or provocative, full communication transparency with human counterparts if they initiate contact. We will monitor the situation carefully, but the Zetharian Empire will not be the species that tests humanity's capabilities or breaks whatever fragile peace might be negotiable from this crisis." Her executive officer looked surprised by the restraint in those orders, clearly expecting a more aggressive military response, but nodded acceptance and began implementing the commander's directives. Tyra returned to her command chair, watching tactical displays update with the evolving situation, and wondered whether she had just made the wisest decision of her career or committed an error that future historians would cite as the moment when galactic civilization's fate was sealed. Either way, the choice was made, and all she could do now was watch as humanity delivered its message to the galaxy and hope that when the demonstration ended, there would still be room for peace, for understanding, for a Zetherian warrior and a human scholar to find each other again across the vast distances that separated their worlds. The stars offered no answers, only the eternal silence of space and the waiting darkness between civilizations poised on the edge of transformation, and Tyra settled in to do what warriors had always done in moments of uncertainty: remain vigilant, trust in training and instinct, and hope that when clarity finally emerged from chaos, it would reveal a future worth the terrible price being paid in its creation.